has been claiming, constructing, and militarizing islands in the nearby South China Sea, dangerously amping up tensions with the U.S. and its allies in Asia. But if local hostilities did boil over into conflict, it would have major global consequences. Because the original post-war agreements also stipulated that in return for Japan's pacifism, the U.S. is legally bound to defend them.
Japan is looking to amend its pacifist constitution to give its military more might. Japan has already begun to rearm itself in ways never seen before since the end of World War II. In December last year, the Japanese government announced that its defense budget will be increased to a record $47 billion for the fiscal year that began in April this year. Among others, the allocation will be used to purchase 105 F-35A stealth jets and acquire Japan's first aircraft carriers since World War II.
それはアジアの国々は軍事国家日本によってどれだけ侵略され、どれだけ痛めつけられてきたかっていうことをまだみんなちゃんと覚えてますよね、70数年前。だって中国だって朝鮮だってもちろんベトナムだってシンガポールだって、全部日本は侵略したわけで、あの軍事国家日本がまた復活したら大変なことになると思ってるじゃないですか。その割に日本は反省してないんですよね。
The dramatic shift in Japan's security policy has sent shockwaves around the region, particularly in China and South Korea, two countries that suffered the brunt of Japan's military aggression in the 20th century.
In 1931, without even informing their own elected government, the Japanese forces in Manchuria seized the capital Mukden and then overran the rest of the territory. A puppet state, Manchukuo, was proclaimed under a puppet ruler. Henry Puyi, the last emperor of China, who had been deposed in 1911, was dragged out of retirement. At its headquarters in Geneva, the League of Nations now faced its first great test. Japan was universally condemned. But her response was blunt.
Japan, however, finds it impossible to accept the report adopted by the Assembly.
The Japanese then just walked out, and the League suddenly realized there was nothing it could do about Manchuria. Japan was declared an international pariah, but it didn't care. Its leaders had turned their eyes to further conquests in China. These were easy pickings. China was in a state of chaos. The government of Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek was locked in conflict with the Chinese Communist Party under Mao Zedong. There was civil war. In 1936, as a precursor to invasion, the Japanese signed a pact with Hitler. The aim was to guard against any attack by Soviet Russia were it to move on China. Then in July 1937, the Japanese provoked an incident with Chinese troops and invaded. At first, the Chinese were taken by surprise, but they soon fought back fiercely, the communists even joining the Kuomintang in a united front. The Japanese responded with amphibious landings. By the end of 1937, they had overrun much of northern China and the coast. The Japanese fought this war with exceptional brutality, bombing cities indiscriminately. Westerners living in the commercial center, the port of Shanghai, were now evacuated. The city was then besieged for 3 months. It suffered widespread damage, the Japanese forces showing no pity or concern for the native population. But it was after the capture of Nanking, then the Chinese capital, on December the 17th, 1937, that the Japanese forces really ran amok. Over 300,000 civilians are estimated to have been massacred during a 6-week orgy of rape and indiscriminate killing. The Japanese even attacked British and US warships which had been sent to protect their shipping and trade. The worst incident came on December the 12th, 1937. The American gunboat Panay was sunk by Japanese bombers. 50 crewmen died. Despite this, the Western powers refused to intervene. So the League of Nations could do nothing. In the United States, President Roosevelt wanted to impose a naval blockade of Japan.
It has become clear that acts and policies of nations in other parts of the world have far-reaching effects on us.
But the British would have none of it, fearing that it might provoke a war. So all Roosevelt could offer was a $25 million loan to Chiang Kai-shek to buy arms. Even though the communists were now fighting alongside the Kuomintang, the Soviet Union did little to help either. Its only involvement was a series of clashes along its own border with Manchuria. But China itself received nothing. Instead, it had to fight on alone. During 1938, the Japanese overran Canton and pushed the Chinese forces deeper into the west of the country. All the rhetoric of the League of Nations, all those promises to stop international aggression had come to nothing. And by now the Western powers were facing aggression much closer to home.